Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Krishna Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Enam Kanvandam Aravindadalaya Taksham Bhagavatam Samat Sitam Pura Sundarangam Kandar Agom Vigamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakale Priya Priti Manti Vasyan Dipan Dikayanti Jiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami 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 Govindam Adi
Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Radhe Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai 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 Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Padma Keval Bhagati Sadma. Vando moi savadhana mate. जहर प्रसादे भाई ए भव तो रिया जा. कृष्ण प्राप्ति हो जहाँ होइते. गुरु मुखा पद्म वाक्या जीते ते को रिया क्या. गुरु मुखा पद्म वाक्या जीते ते को रिया क्या. और ना कोरी हमने आशा. श्री गुरु चरण रति ऐसे तमा गति. श्री गुरु चरण रति ऐसे तमा गति. ये पश्चादे पूरे सर्व आशा. ये पश्चादे पूरे सर्व आशा. चक्षुदान थिलो ये जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से. चक्षुदान थिलो ये जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से. दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो. दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो. प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ हैते अविद्या विनाशयते. प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ हैते अविद्या विनाशयते. वेदे गाय होर चरितो. वेदे गाय होर चरितो. श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु. श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु. লোকে না লোকের জীবন শিলা প্রভুপা লোকের জীবন हाँ हाँ प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पद छाया हाँ हाँ प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पद छाया एबे आज घुसुकुति भन शीला प्रभुपाद पतित पवन श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु लोके ना लोकेर जीवन शीला प्रभुपा लोकेर जीवन हे हा हा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पाद छाया बोलो प्रभुपाद हाँ हाँ प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पाद छाया एबे आज घुसकुति भन शीला प्रभुपाद पतित पवन जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा शीला प्रभुपादा प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने नमो नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे नमस्ते जय जय प्रभुपाद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि हरि बोलो। निताई गौरांगो निताई गौरांगो निताई गौरांगो निताई गौरांगो निताई 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 गौरांगो बोलो निताई 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 गौरांगो जय सच्चिनंदन जय सच्चिनंदन जय सच्चिनंदन जय सच्चिनंदन जय सच्चिनंदन गौर हरि बोलो जय सच्चिनंदन गौर हरि गौरा गौरा गौर हरि हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे बोलो हरि नाम बोलो हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे बोलो बोलो हरि नाम बोलो हरि नाम बोलो हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे हरे बोलो हरि राम हे राम हरे राम मुख से बोलिए बोलिए सभी लोग बोले हरि नाम बोलो हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण हरे हरे Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bolo Harna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Bolo bolo Harinam bolo. Hey, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Radhe Shyam. Hey, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare Hare. What's that smell? Dankers. Oh, it's the ladies over there. Whew, getting intoxicated here. I think they're not following the principles. They're getting intoxicated.
Hare Krishna. Jiyanilo Premadhana Karuna Prachur
Hare Krishna.
So we're gathered here this morning. It's just a few days before on the Satila Kadasi day. Our very dear godbrother Vishal Prabhu left this world. So this was for many, many years his intense desire that somehow he leave his body here in Vrindavan, so Krishna fulfilled that desire. So we're gathered to share our memories of Vishal Prabhu. So Govinda Maharaj is here? Not yet. He'll come. All right. Okay. So, since Govinda Maharaj is not here, then I'm next on the list, so with the permission of the Vaishnavas, I'll speak some memories of Vishal Prabhu. Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya-manubhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa-kadamayam Dadati Svapadandhigam Adadanaschanandantairidam Yache Puna Srimad Rupa-padambujo Dulisyam Janmajanmani Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Panchakalpatrubhyasta Kripa Sindhuvebhata Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. So I've known Vishal Prabhu since 1970. Probably at 69 also. I was sent to LA to be trained up in the old La Cienega temple. But I don't have any memories from 69. But I remember that Vishal Prabhu was, somehow he was very, very dear to Srila Prabhupada. He wasn't particularly known as a great scholar. He wasn't particularly known as a great preacher. In fact, if you ever heard him give class, he always started because he heard somewhere Prabhupada said that a perfect class means to mention, you're not this body, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Lord Chaitanya, you have to mention Lord Chaitanya. So he would always start his class that you're not this body, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya has appeared in this age of Kali to give us a chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. But still, he was very dear to Prabhupada because he was surrendered at least to a certain extent. But he was very surrendered to instructions that were very dear to Srila Prabhupada, including distributing books. Because we just saw one picture from 1969 where we used to chant. That I remember chanting on downtown LA. He's there with his back to God, as those days we hadn't started big book distribution yet. But 1970 I spent some time in the Vatseka temple. That time the Brahmacharya ashram was where the Govinda's gift shop is now. And I remember he had his one corner of the Brahmacharya ashram, because even those days, Vishal Prabhu of course is famous, he never let anybody get near him or touch him. So there was one corner of the Brahmacharya ashram, there was like a 5-foot or 10-foot boundary around. Nobody could come near that. That was Vishal's space. So even those days, 50 years ago, he still had this funny thing about people getting close to him. But I remember he was always distributing books because he knew that was Vishal's saving grace. that he knew that Prabhupada's dearest desire was distributing books. So he was always somehow distributing books, either go on the Harinam party, or he'd wander around. Not far from there is Venice Beach. In fact, at one point, I was selling spiritual sky incense for LA Temple, and I had many shops down on Venice Beach, and I would go to sell them incense, and I would see piles of small books on their counter. And then I realized when Vishal, in order to increase his his scores, he would put books on consignment in all the different little shops in Venice Beach. He put them on consignment. We didn't actually sell them, but he would count them as being sold. So, and even the ordinary people, they knew Vishal very well. They would, because I asked about the books, he said, oh yeah, he always comes in here at the end of the day and puts these books here on consignment. He said, but we really respect him, you know, he's really into his thing. You can't get near him or you can't touch him, because, you know, if you touch someone, you get their karma. He's really heavy. He's really deep into his thing. So next I remember Vishal from Vrindavan. Somehow he came to Vrindavan. And he went many places with Prabhupada. Somehow he had some funds. He went to Africa with Srila Prabhupada and many places. And he told me a story one time that Prabhupada was suggesting him, why don't you go to such and such place? He said, oh, but Prabhupada, he gave some argument why that wasn't a good place. Then why don't you go to such, and he gave some argument. And Prabhupada suggested another place, and he said, I want to go to this place. So Prabhupada looked at him, you know, a little disappointed. So Vishal realized, you know, he was arguing with Prabhupada. He said, I guess I'm not very surrendered. Prabhupada said, not at all. He said, you're Nard Muni, you go wherever you want. So then in '84 I joined Krishna Balaram Temple. And Vishal was here, and I remember he was in charge of collecting for the Goshala. And nobody got past him. Now that I made the announcement about his disappearance, so many devotees are writing, yeah, I came, walked into the temple room immediately, to Vishal, you know, bowed down before me, which sort of shocked me that some devotee was bowing down to me, and then immediately asked me for a donation for Goshala. So, and besides Goshala, he was always distributing Prabhupada's books. Then somehow or other, he lost his visa, and he got somehow on some list where he couldn't get a visa again. So I'd always see him in Miami. In Miami still, he was out distributing books every day. He knew somehow or other this is the way to please the spiritual master. He knew that was his only hope. Somehow he can please the spiritual master. He wasn't a sloka guy, although he knew many slokas actually. Slokas that glorified the spiritual master. Just like here, he tells the story how Prabhupada was circumambulating the temple, and Vishal was quoting that verse that we think that your goodness is met with us by the will of providence, you know, to cross us over this great ocean of Kali. And it just rained, everything was wet, the steps were all wet, the floor was all wet. So Prabhupada said, so it is providence that all this water is here? Why don't you do something practical, clean it up? Immediately he paid his obeisance to Prabhupada and grabbed a squeegee and began. This was Vishal's good point, that he was always anxious to please Srila Prabhupada. So there by Miami I would meet him, a few other places I would meet him. He was always distributing Prabhupada's books. And finally, he was, although once you get on a list where they don't want to give you a visa, it's very difficult. Vishal had this incredible determination. Somehow he gave lots of Mahaprasad to somebody in the embassy. Eventually he got temporary visa, immediately came back to Vrindavan. He had great love for Vrindavan. He was always, even during lockdown, he would be running off to Radhakund, take some water from Radhakund, and on their disappearance days, he'd always come to me, where's the samadhi of so-and-so, so he could go pay his obeisances. So in this way, and of course he was always jolly. Just like you see him, he was even in the beginning, he was sort of a little bit overweight, like that big, fat, jolly Vishal. So we're very happy that Krishna took him very quickly, without too much struggle, and he left here on an auspicious day in the month of Magh, Satila Ekadasi, in the holy land of Vrindavan Dham. Sriman Vishal Prabhu ki. So I have an offering from one of the very first, not the first, but one of the very first presidents of Krishna Balaram Mandir, Gunarnava. So I'll read, with the permission of the Vaishnavas, I'll read this. Disappearance days of Vaishnava devotees are very auspicious for a variety of reasons. One special reason is it gives the opportunity to divulge and share the activities and mentalities of devotees rendering devotional service, Param Dharm, to their Supreme Lords, Gaur-Nitai, Krishna Balaram, Radha Shyam-Sundar, through their topmost loving devotee, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Today we celebrate the passing from this world to the eternal spiritual abode of our loving God brother Vishal Prabhu. I have had very little association with Vishal over the past 40 years or so. I remember the first time I saw Vishal Prabhu, I was a young brahmachari helping to build Krishna Balaram home in Vrindavan. I remember seeing him a larger than life personality. Devotees were taking prasad outside on the grass near the construction site. I noticed that he had 2 large cloth bags draped crisscross across his chest. This was the iconic feature of Vishal. So even way back in the old days. Vishal reminded me of a Mexican cowboy with double straps of bullet holders across his chest. Instead, the weapons he held were Srila Prabhupada's books in his bags. Vishal was so happy to be in Vrindavan. He was expressing this in a large voice for all to hear. A devotee, I cannot remember who, told me that Vishal was a big book distributor from Los Angeles. As I got to know Vishal Prabhu, I noticed certain characteristics of his personality. He was quite loud, jovial, and seemed somewhat eccentric. For example, he did not like others coming too close or too near to him, especially if he did not know them. The majority of the time he would stand alone, aloof from others. His sense of humor, I felt like he could at any time could be friendly or not, so he would let you know it. As the Vrindavan project became more developed, Vishal, when there, would frequently read Srimad Bhagavatam to the devotees while they were honoring prasad. Only then, after some time, he would take his prasadam. I thought that was a wonderful thing to do. Das Anudas. Vishal always had both his cloth bags on his body. I wondered if he slept with them also. Personally, I also had an out-there sense of humor. As we got to know one another more and more, our humor became one of the focal points of our relationship. As an example, in Hindi there is a word we did not completely understand the meaning, something like bilkul. I think it means something like absolutely. So I turned it around and we used to greet each other with cowbill. Another part of our co-constructed personal greetings was Hanji. We got sillier and sillier as time progressed, and I would greet him by wiggling my fingers under my chin. He would reply by wiggling his fingers on the top of his head. Then he might be talking to another devotee, and I would creep up behind him and say in an eardrum, and say in his ear, button. And Vishal would say, button back. If Bibi Govinda, before he was sannyas, was there, he would join in. Vishal and I had a great connection through our moments of silliness, silly humor. Vishal loved Srila Prabhupada. He gave Srila Prabhupada lots of financial donations and personal gifts. He asked Srila Prabhupada lots of philosophical questions about Krishna consciousness. Vishal was never shy to glorify or say something to Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes devotees would cringe at what Vishal would say to Srila Prabhupada. However, His Divine Grace would always respond with kindness and give Vishal some quite interesting responses, often funny responses. Srila Prabhupada seemed to really appreciate Vishal's efforts in book distribution. His raw determination to sell Prabhupada's books was unique. Sometimes he had one person or even a group of people in his sites. He just locked them in, mesmerized them, and they left with Srila Prabhupada's books. No one escaped, always extracting good donations. I know Vishal traveled with Srila Prabhupada in India before I came to Vrindavan in early 72 and distributed many of Prabhupada's books in America, I was told. In America, I was told, he traveled and was a huge distributor of Srila Prabhupada's books. Vishal Prabhu loved preaching. He was always preaching to anyone and everyone. He did not discriminate too much. Book distribution and preaching seemed to be his whole life. Vishal's love and attachment to honoring prasadam was immense. He just loved respecting prasadam. He was always ready to donate Lakshmi for a feast. I personally felt Vishal derived a lot of spiritual strength by eating only prasadam. My perception was to see Vishal while slightly aloof while focusing on prasadam. I'm sure there will be more prasad memory stories as today unfolds. Jai C.C. Gaurnitai, C.C. Krishna Balaram, C.C. Radha Shyam Sundar. He wrote a whole book, my goodness. Due to time restraints, I would like to share with you all today two stories that come to mind. Although short stories, they have capacity to capture your imagination, make you laugh, or even make you cry. These events and experiences manifested during the time when I was temple president in Vrindavan. Number one, I vividly remember the first experience like it happened yesterday. At the front of the temple, either side of leaving through the main entrance door, Vishal's established preaching room was on the right side, Samadhi side. Morning, noon and night, that room was Vishal's domain for preaching. His preaching was uncompromised, selling books, making life members, collecting donations for the deities, prasadam and Goshala. He appeared on fire. On opposite side there was a room that became the domain of Kamalacharan. I called him the Beast. At that time his age was around mid-50s to early 60s. Kamalacharan was a Prabhupada disciple from West Bengal. He was a cultured but very passionate Bengali gentleman. One might say he appeared to have very similar characteristics as Vishal. Kamalacharan was a results man. He used to say to me, "You judge me by my results." I would say to myself, Krishna has arranged these two heavyweights to come and live here in Vrindavan to do these preaching services in the Krishna Balaram temple. They seem to have similar natures, eccentricities, passion, and desire to please. Observing those two devotees while engaged in their preaching night after night, day after day, was just literally out of this world. The relationship between Vishal and Kamalacharan had everything and more. Observing them together in their respective rooms, their verve, passion, and determination was electric. They were so transcendently competitive, their focus was simply unbelievable. Vishal, even though he was very passionate to do his service, he was always able to fall back on his humor and compassion, especially if Kamalacharan was having a slow day. Vishal had the edge in being able to put his arm around Kamala's shoulder and give him some encouragement. Vishal would say something like, Come on, Prabhuji, you're not going to make this an easy day for me, are you? I would say to Vishal when we were alone together, come on, Kamalacharan does not realize your secret weapon of your book bag straps. They are like ammunition that he does not wear himself. Vishal would just look at me and laugh. Number 2. The final experience I want to share is an interaction that Vishal had with Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan. Vishal and the astrological history that was told to him by a local astrologer. There was a small window of time when Vishal Prabhu appeared to become somewhat unhappy, morose, quiet, and more aloof. Devotees were concerned about his changed mentality. I myself tried talking with him on quite a few occasions, but to no avail. Vishal had become very tight-lipped and uncommunicative. It was at a time when Srila Prabhupada was about to visit at any time. One evening when I was with Vishal in the temple room, I noticed that he had a new set of neck beads with an amulet attached. His neck beads looked unusually tight around his neck. I was concerned about it and asked Vishal if they were causing him discomfort. Vishal replied that he was fine and his beads were not too tight. The next evening I was sitting in Srila Prabhupada's room with a number of devotees when Vishal came into the room, but he was not his usual smiling, loudly glorifying self that glorified Srila Prabhupada. He looked unhappy. Srila Prabhupada seemed to notice a change and asked Vishal if he was sick. Within moments, Vishal asked Prabhupada if he could please clarify an issue that was causing him concern. Yes, Srila Prabhupada replied. Vishal mentioned that he went to the bazaar in Loy Bazaar and was introduced to an astrologer. Vishal had asked the astrologer about his future or something to that effect. The man told Vishal that in his former life he had taken birth as a rodent of some kind that lived in temples in Vrindavan. The astrologer had pointed out that this was due to Rahu's influence. He continued that in this life he was still vulnerable to Rahu's control. The astrologer then suggested that Vishal wore around his neck an amulet that contained mantras or something to correct the control of planet Rahu. Vishal had to pay a lot of money for the astrologer's services. Srila Prabhupada listened to Vishal's story. All the devotees in the room, including myself, seemed rapt with attention. We were seemingly as a group hanging on every word and waiting in anticipation of how Srila Prabhupada would respond. Srila Prabhupada looked straight into Vishal's eyes with such wide eyes, very fierce like, and with a loud voice he said, Krishna with his little pinky can destroy thousands of Rahus. And again repeating, thousands of Rahus. Prabhupada then said, Sarvadharmam Prichaja Mamikam Saranam Braja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. We all cheered loudly, Haribo, 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 Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. As this chanting was going on, Vishal grabbed his necklace and was trying to snap the nylon thread, but it looked like he was threatening to cut Vishal's fingers. Srila Prabhupada shouted, stop, stop, not like that. You will hurt yourself. Cut with scissors. Vishal looked on, so relieved, and thanked Srila Prabhupada again and again. Srila Prabhupada said to us all, don't indulge these astrologers. They will cheat you only. Krishna is all powerful. We are his devotees. So just chant Hare Krishna. That's all. Krishna has promised he will protect us. Do not fear. Vishal's expression appeared so much lighter, it looked like he could float away. Srila Prabhupada had taken all the weight off of Vishal's shoulders. What an evening it was in Braj that night. Vishal no doubt always relied and fully depended on Srila Prabhupada's direction. The relationship he had with Srila Prabhupada seemed unique, and Vishal took all personal instructions from Prabhupada as nectar. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Vishal Prabhu. That reminds me of another story that Vishal told me. It's one of my favorite stories. Prabhupada again was walking around the temple, and Vishal was standing out front, and he's going, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. So Prabhupada stuck, and he pushed his cane on the marble and said, so you like this place? Oh yes, Srila Prabhupada, it's wonderful. Then with a flick of his wrist, Prabhupada said, then take it, it's yours. So Prabhupada gave Vrindavan to Vishal with a flick of his wrist. This is the power of the pure devotee. Prabhupada is giving all of us with a little flick of his wrist, Vrindavan. Sri Vishal Prabhu ki. So next we'd like to call Daivi Shakti Mataji to share her. Oh, Govinda Maharaj is here, okay. So we'll call His Holiness Bibi Govinda Maharaj to give his offering to Vishal Prabhu. Yeah.
Can we have a vote on it? Who wants Maharaj? Who wants Govinda Maharaj?
So we invite Our Holiness Bibi Govinda Maharaj. He's coming to offer his memories to Vishal Prabhu. Hare Krishna. All my respected God brothers and God sisters, Hare Krishna, assembled Vaishnavas. After Gunarnava Prabhu's offering, what can we say? It was written with so much love for an old friend. I'm sad that Vishal has gone, and at the same time, I'm very happy for Vishal. The other day from the Jamuna, I sent a picture of his cremation ceremony to His Holiness Shivram Swami Maharaj. And Maharaj replied, "Who is that?" And I said, "Vishal Prabhu." He said, "Did I know him?" And I said, "Yes, everybody knew Vishal. He was the big devotee who was always jolly, always was wearing a Shastra bag on his body, and he always loved distributing Srila Prabhupada's books." And Shivram Maharaj went, "No, he left." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Good job, Vishal. You did it in Vrindavan." So naturally we're sad that we don't have the association of our wonderful God brother, but we're very happy for him. He's done something that I've always prayed for. We were here at the time when Srila Prabhupada went to Samadhi, and that I was the cook at Iskcon at that time. The other day
Bijamuna, I was talking to Kishan Lal. I don't know if any of you all know who Kishan Lal is, but he's been working at Iskcon since the property was first taken. And he was telling me stories about Vishal. He was telling me how Vishal always carried candies in his pocket, prasadam candies, so he could always give prasadam to the children. He told me at one point, Vishal, in the early days, every time he would leave the guest house, if there were like some poor people or children outside, he'd give them 20 rupees. So we were remembering so many things. I looked at Kishan, I said, Iskcon has had so many temple presidents over here in Vrindavan. Who has been the craziest? And Kishan, he just smiled and he wouldn't say anything. And then I looked at him and I said, and who was the best cook? And when I said that, he threw his arms around me and he said, you, of course, Maharaj. I was the cook back then. When I came to Vrindavan, first time in '76, and in '77 when I came back, Vishal was one of the first people that I met, and we became friends. And he was always jolly, he was always kind. Vishal understood, he soon realized that I was from down south in America. And believe it or not, I think Vishal was from North Carolina or from someplace. And whenever we would meet, he would always greet me with the accent that the southern people speak in America. It was like, hey y'all, how you boys doing? You doing all right now, Prabhu? Always jolly. There wouldn't be a time that I ever met Vishal, and after like exchanging kind words to one another, sitting with one another, he'd reach inside of his bag and he'd pull out prasad and he would give me prasad without fail. One story that he told me about himself was at the time of the opening, I guess the year after the opening of Krishna Balaram Mandir. He was living here, and Srila Prabhupada would do parikram of the temple every day. And generally when Prabhupada would do parikram of the temple, Prabhupada would be very angry. Now generally we don't think a lot about Srila Prabhupada's angry mood, but Srila Prabhupada's disciples from all over the world had, worked so hard to build Sri Krishna Balaram Mandir here in Vrindavan, and the fact that it wasn't being managed nicely would really, really put Prabhupada in a lot of anxiety. So Vishal told me how he was walking around the temple, Prabhupada was circumambulating the temple. If you'd see like a light over here above this door going out, it was like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, the light was on, Prabhupada would just stop and he'd look at his disciples and he'd say, "You are blind! You cannot see!" And then the devotees would start to tremble. And then he'd take his cane and he'd point it at the light and he would say, "Just see, Krishna's energy is being burnt. You're doing nothing about it. How can you manage?" And he was like that. But Vishal Prabhu, he said every morning when Prabhupada was walking around with the big devotees, the managers, he would stand in the front, right at the front of the temple. And he'd have his hands folded like this. And every day when Prabhupada would pass by, Chintamani prakarasad masukalpa briksha, and Prabhupada would look at him. Prabhupada was in an angry mood, and then Prabhupada would continue around the temple. And he'd come back, and Vishal, would chant, Chintamani prakara sadma sukalpa briksha. And Prabhupada would look at him. And he said, like, third time around, Prabhupada looked at him, and he's like chanting like this. And Prabhupada looked at him and said, why don't you shut up and do something useful? Vishal said, I love that so much. He said, I love that so much that my spiritual master spoke to me that way. In English we have the saying, you can't judge a book by looking at the cover of the book. And, a lot of times from the external perspective, people might have perceived Vishal from his, he had a kind of eccentric nature. Although, for myself, because I'm eccentric, we always just sort of came together and we had a good time whenever we were together. Pardon? Eccentrically, we eccentrically had a good time together. But he always had Prabhupada's books inside of his bag. And he was, in the beginning, all the Iskcon devotees, they carried what they called their Shastra bag. You couldn't go anywhere without having your bag on with some book inside that you're going to, if you had a few minutes during the day, you're going to sit and read that book. He always had a book. He loved studying Prabhupada's books. And he always used to tell me, he would tell me, I joined so early in San Francisco, and like so many other people, I had been, caught in the, the maze of psychedelia in San Francisco. And he would say, I think that I was too much caught in that whole mood of psychedelia. He said, and I think that it burned holes in my brain. He said, I can't remember so much what I read in Prabhupada's books, but there's nothing more that I like to do than read Srila Prabhupada's books. So at the time Prabhupada passed away, I was the cook, and I remember all of the devotees, they took Prabhupada on Prikram, and I couldn't go because I had to stay back and cook the feast. Myself and Narottam and Riksharaj, we stayed back. And they brought Prabhupada back, then put Prabhupada in Samadhi. And I remember standing there and just like praying, and my prayer would always be, Srila Prabhupada, please just allow me to give up my life in Vrindavan. Please let me be like you. Please let me be like you in so many ways, with your kindness and your compassion and that big, beautiful, open, non-judgmental heart that you have. And let me follow you and pass away in Vrindavan. And the other day I was thinking, and Vishal did it, because he was blessed. I'm not sure, what year did he actually come to Vrindavan? Well, when I came in 76 for a visit, he was here. And he may have been here. Smara, do you know what time, what year he came here?
About 73 he came.
He came in 73. And except for a few years when there were visa problems, Vishal Prabhu spent his whole life in the dust of Vrindavan. He practically lived here for 50 years in Radharani's sacred dham. Shri Radha and Krishna, Radhesham Sundar, Krishna Balaram's sacred dham, Vrindavan. How blessed is a person like that? We may see something eccentric from the outside, but just think, 47 years he lived in the dust of Vrindavan. How blessed he was. 47 years in Vrindavan, he practiced Krishna consciousness following the instructions of his spiritual master. And undoubtedly, like all of us, Vishal had his high points and he had his low points. But because Krishna consciousness doesn't go without struggles, there's always struggles in Krishna consciousness. But he was here. And he loved Vrindavan, and he loved the Brajabasis, and he loved his spiritual master. So though I'm sad, and Panch can, he can attest to the fact that at least 2-3 times over the past number of months I've asked Panchagoda, where is Vishal? Because I wanted to see Vishal. About a month ago, I went to the MVT shop one day. I put my mask on and I bundled up and I went to the shop to buy something. And when I came back, it was evening time, and I saw there's one elderly Israeli devotee who lives here. He's kind of big also, and he walks on sticks. And I was thinking it was Vishal, and I went up to him and I said, Prabhu, excuse me, what is your name? Because I didn't know if it was Vishal or not. I wanted to see Vishal. And I'm sad that I didn't have the chance to see Vishal before he left. I mentioned how I had spoken to Kishan Lal on the banks of the Jamuna the other day, who was the craziest temple president in the past 47 years that you've been with Iskcon here, and he wouldn't comment. No, he said Deen Bandhu was good temple president. He said Deen Bandhu was a very nice man. You won't believe it, despite the fact that I'm, zero in managerial skills. I'm lost. Somehow or other, even I had a stint as being the temple president in Vrindavan. From the summer of '83 until Gopurnima of '84. Huh? I'm sorry to hear that. And Iskcon Vrindavan at that time, it was strange. I mean, we had the Gurukula, and the Gurukula hated everybody else in the temple. And we had the temple, and the temple hated everybody else in the project. And we had the guest house with one Bengali devotee who was in charge, and he hated everybody else. So everybody was just busy hating one another. Then I was sent here to be the temple president. And I was going, my God, what to do? And I didn't know what to do, other than to make sure that there was good prasad all the time. And I used to try to grab devotees from all the different departments and stuff them inside of buses, and we would go to places like, Farrukhabad and Etawah and this place and that place, and we'd have Harinam programs and just try to get devotees preaching together. I mean, Burijan used to come with us, and Jagatarini Mataji and Gurupad, their son, he was about 3 years old at the time. And, we'd have like thousands of Indians there, and Gurupad would get up in front of the microphone and he'd go, "You are not the body. Chant Hare Krishna." And the crowd would go crazy. And sometimes I get Vishal to go also. And because I saw that Vishal at that time, he was a little bit like lonely, little sort of like alienated sometimes, a little too much to himself. I said, I should spend time with Vishal. And Vishal was round, and I was round. So I was thinking, what can I do? And I went out and I bought a couple of really, really cheap Indian bicycles. And Vishal and I used to go on rides together. We used to go, one day we rode to Mathura back then, and he was in bliss. And, we spent a lot of time together. And then when I was leaving in when I was leaving in I guess, after Gopurnima, 84, I went to see Vishal one day, and I offered my obeisances, and I said, Prabhu, I'm leaving. And, you know, we offered obeisances. And he was a wrestler also when he was in college or sometime. So we'd always have wrestling matches. I mean, when I hear that people say that Vishal didn't like people touching him, that's curious, because we used to like get down and he would like pull all of his wrestling holds on me and turn me upside down, and I would try to pin him down. And I was saying, Vishal, I've so much appreciated having your association. He said, Ayodhya-padi Prabhu, I've so much appreciated having your association. He said, but I'd like to tell you something. And it's a lesson that I got from the lips of Vishal that I keep to this very day. You know, I was saying goodbye, and he said, I'd like to tell you something. And he looked at me, he said, you're a nice person. He said, but you have to be careful because you're proud. And when I heard him say that, it wasn't like I became angry, or I was like thinking, you're telling me that I'm proud when you have so many things like this. For me, it was sort of like, you know, from his lips, you know, words from my spiritual master and Sri Krishna were coming. It was a very nice instruction. So I'm sad that he's gone, but I'm happy that he left in Vrindavan, and I have faith that this time, you know, by the grace of Srila Prabhupada and by the grace of the dust of Vrindavan, now he's with, you know, Krishna Balaram and Radhe Shyam, and he's doing what he always hankered to do. Vishal Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.
So we'd like to thank His Holiness B.B. Govinda.
Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhishcha kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. That was my exchange with Vishal Prabhu, many times giving him Mahaprasadam or money, Lakshmi. So this is a tribute to Vishal Prabhu on his passing from this world, from his previous wife Vishalini, who we all know has been the wife of Gunarnava for maybe 20-some years, and they were here to help establish Prabhupada's temple here in Vrindavan in 74, 75, and so she sent us this memorial. Life should therefore move in such a way that everyone acts in Krishna consciousness and understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of a spiritual master. The plans of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are understood by His mercy, and the plans of the devotees are as good as His plans. One should follow such plans and be victorious in the struggle for existence. From the Bhagavad-Gita as it is, 1134, the purport. Om Jnanatimirandhyasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer this personal reflection using my imperfect senses and memory to honor Vishal Prabhu, who surrendered to the plans of God and Guru and ultimately became victorious in his struggle for existence. This offering is not comprehensive and meekly skims over personal remembrances and shares insight of what I've learned from Vishal Prabhu's life and passing. My first meeting with Vishal. My first encounter with Vishal Prabhu, I was just over 20 years old, working in Los Angeles, living at Venice Beach. There was a loud knock on the door. There appeared Vishal Prabhu, unwilling to leave until I bought a Back to Godhead. Sometime later, he approached me on the Venice promenade. I left reluctantly with an Ishopanishad and less money in my pocket. I soon after moved into the San Francisco temple. After a few months, Bhutatma Prabhu, the president, called me saying, "Prabhupada's servant has asked to marry you. He just came back from India traveling with Prabhupada." I asked, "What should I do?" "Marry him," he replied. The temple quickly arranged a televised wedding at the City Hall registry. Devotees passed out simply wonderfuls from huge trays. I knew Prabhu's name, that he was 13 years older than me, and his astrology sign. The plan began to unravel. Los Angeles en route to Vrindavan. Vishal Prabhu's focus was always on successfully getting special mercy from Srila Prabhupada. That mercy came in many forms. Prabhupada arrived in Los Angeles. Vishal Prabhu arranged for a box of mangoes to be sent to Prabhupada's room. Responding, Srila Prabhupada called for Vishal Prabhu and me and gifted us a heavy blue plaid blanket. Prabhupada was going to give initiations, but they were suddenly called off due to him feeling unwell. The next day, I was making floral arrangements. A devotee called, "Quick, Prabhupada is calling you." Prabhupada took my japa beads, instructing me to come back the next morning. A lot had happened in a short time. The next morning, I entered Prabhupada's room. While handing me back my japa beads, he announced with a very, very big grin, "Your name is Vishalini Dasi." It's sufficient to describe life leading up to that point. Felt like sweet rice mixed with sand. As many other couples proclaimed, negotiating arranged marriages in those early days. At that time, I had a special service requiring me to work directly with the deities. The third day, I was called to Prabhupada's room again, this time to receive second initiation. Prabhupada seemed to shower extreme mercy by responding to Vishal Prabhu's requests. Other endeavoring brief encounters. I remember Srila Prabhupada pulling Vishal's Sika after Bhagavatam class while walking past his disciple that was bending over offering the prayer. "And thus I accept you," and this is Vishal Prabhu as he's offering, "and thus I accept you as captain of my ship for crossing over this dangerous ocean of Kali." In Sri Vrindavan Dham. We arrived to Raman Reti when there was only a flat plot of land with 4 arches built and 3 huts for brahmachari accommodation. These days were quite austere. There was only a handful of us at the temple site at that time. Anand Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother, cooked for us. The atmosphere was ever so sweet. I stayed in a nearby Shanti ashram. In the middle of summer, no fans, limited electricity, and the middle of winter bathing 3 a.m. outside under a cold water faucet, fully clothed. Later, an incident happened involving a devotee's poor choice. When Prabhupada heard, he instructed the most austere diet for devotees of khichdi and potato, and potato and khichdi and khichdi and potato, on and on. Vishal Prabhu managed to avoid that era by spending time in New Delhi and possibly Bombay, collecting for the building of the Vrindavan temple. As the bill took shape, more devotees came, and Prabhupada would come periodically to oversee the progress. This was the most nectarian time ever. Vishal Prabhu would return each time from collecting when Prabhupada would come. During these times there are many stories, some that have shared online in the past week. One pastime with an astrologer. I think we heard this one, to ward off the effects of Rahu. One time an astrologer convinced Prabhu to wear an amulet with the neck beads around his neck to ward off the effects of Rahu. When Vishal Prabhu went for Darshan of Prabhupada, along with other devotees in Prabhupada's room, Vishal inquired if he could seek clarification of something. Prabhupada said yes. When Vishal explained the details of his astrologer visit and how he was prescribed by the astrologer to wear an amulet to counteract the effects of Rahu, Prabhupada told him to remove it, explaining there is no need for a devotee of Krishna to place their faith in a material object. Then, with the flip of Srila Prabhupada's pinky, he said, Krishna can annihilate thousands of Rahus with the flip of his finger. Grihastha life. Devotees frequently had the fortune to sit in Prabhupada's room in the evening with Srila Prabhupada. These were the most nectarian times ever. One time Vishal Prabhu said to Prabhupada, "Isn't it true that a wife should be obedient and do everything her husband says?" Prabhupada smiled when he replied, saying, "And you should be arrogant? No, you are chanting Hare Krishna. She is chanting Hare Krishna. You are saying Gayatri. She is saying Gayatri. You are doing service. She is doing service. Where Krishna consciousness is concerned, where is the difference?" Then Srila Prabhupada clenched both fists and rubbed his knuckles together. He said, "Maybe you have seen in Vrindavan 2 rams fighting, and they lock their horns," grinding his knuckles against each other as if to demonstrate. But then they stop, and they just walk away. Similarly, disagreement between husband and wife should be taken no more seriously than child's play. Offering gifts. For each Vyasa Puja, we would try to offer personal gifts to Srila Prabhupada. Gold shirt buttons, a walking stick with a silver T handle, a lion's head, ruby eyes, the spiral carved wood made to measure Prabhupada's exact height. One year, we had a 24-karat gold spoon made with an engraving for Prabhupada. When Vishal Prabhu asked Prabhupada's servant whether Prabhupada had used it yet, he was told Prabhupada said, "Is it real?" When Prabhupada's servant replied, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, 24-karat gold," Prabhupada said, "Lock it up. Someone will throw it accidentally." We had 2 silver oval dishes that we would offer simply wonderfuls to Srila Prabhupada. We were told Prabhupada would keep a dish in his drawer and sometimes pop one in his mouth while translating at night. Safety at Prabhupada's lotus feet. Vishal Prabhu proclaimed his love for Srila Prabhupada over and over. He would inquire philosophically and boldly recite prayers glorifying Srila Prabhupada. To me, it looked like he felt completely safe at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. Whether Prabhupada was showing the thunderbolt or the rose, it seemed that it didn't matter to Vishal Prabhu. He trusted both equally with love. Krishna conscious procession and consciousness, Krishna consciousness processes and consciousness. Prabhu loved the philosophy, the temple program, prasadam, mahaprasadam, chanting his rounds, reading and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, preaching to devotees and the non-devotees. Krishna consciousness was his language. He didn't know or have any desire to conform the philosophy or his beliefs to fit another's understanding. His preaching was as it is. He smiled a lot, particularly when making a point. However, sometimes in the absence of understanding his felt intent, devotees sometimes labeled him as difficult, very intense, eccentric, and overbearing. Grihastha life and children. In Vrindavan at that time, Srila Prabhupada did not want Grihasthas living together. During the 15 years that we were married, we honored this and lived separately. Vishal Prabhu lived at the temple and I lived at the Goshala. From 1975 till 1980, Vishal Prabhu had 3 children, all born in Vrindavan. Vrindavaneshwari was born on the 10th of June, 1975, and the first Iskcon baby born in Vrindavan. Saying that, Brijlata, Dhananjaya Prabhu and Balagopal's daughter, was born 1 hour and 10 minutes later. Prabhupada named our first child Vrindavaneshwari. All Garbhadan samskaras were performed, including chanting 50 rounds before conception. Prabhu traveled to Mayapur and sought permission to beget our second child. Prabhupada gave his blessings. So on the 8th of January, 1977, Radharani Chanda was born. All Garbhadam samskaras were also performed, including chanting 75 rounds before conception. On the 8th of August, 1980, Krishnamayi was born. All Garbhadam samskaras were performed, including 100 rounds before this conception. She's included some pictures of her children that were born in Vrindavan, and one of them has a little sari wrapped around her head. The first baby actually left her body here, and only a few months old. She had contracted malaria. Second month. The second. Radharani Chanda. And she was put in Jamuna. And Prabhupada had said that she only had a little bit of time to be in this world. It's still heavy for the mother. Oh, passing away of Radharani Chanda in Vrindavan. On the 7th of August, 1980, 1 month before her sister was born, Radharani Chanda contracted cerebral malaria and left her body. I used to read out loud 6 hours daily to the unborn child. I have been reading Srimad Bhagavatam 4:10 recently of Dhruva Maharaj becoming overwhelmed by the heinous power of illusions and mystic tricks from yakshas in the sky. This resulted in sages assembling to implore Dhruva to take shelter of the holy names that for certainty protects one in any circumstance. Unspoken words of a devotee. While Radharani was leaving her body, I had been awake for over 24 hours. I had not eaten, and I was also 8 months pregnant. Devotees sympathetically wanted Prabhu, Vishal Prabhu, to go to the hospital to give relief. Vishal Prabhu offered reasons why he could not go. Some devotees felt upset with him. Ultimately, he did go. Krishna's causeless mercy allowed me to recall what I just read, how the holy name protects one in all circumstances. Momentarily, while one child was leaving and another about to come, the temporariness of life, how we enter and leave with nothing, was remembered. But what about Vishal Prabhu, who understood his dilemma? The importance of truly being supportive to devotees and holding back speculative assumptions. During that scene, what others did not know is Vishal Prabhu had previously told that when he was 6 years old, he was the only one alone in a room with his mother when she died. This was not known by others. Prabhu in some way seemed to carry a lot inside, never shared with others, perhaps to his end. Prabhupada leaving this world affected many of his disciples in countless ways. A limited number of devotees grew stronger in service and even more resolved in preserving Srila Prabhupada's teachings, leading by their examples. Others have had different journeys, but perhaps some still being plans from the Lord for the soul to overcome the struggle for existence. Now we can only hope that finally we are beginning to realize the true need of holding personal assumptions and speculations to be supportive to any one devotee in this world, particularly as Srila Prabhupada's pioneer soldiers vacate this world. For Vishal Prabhu, who could estimate what he battled from within and desperately clung on to his only true shelter, the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. Surrounded by many, the loneliness he felt and love he craved seemed to be relieved only by thoughts of Prabhupada's Vani and Bapu and following Srila Prabhupada's process. Trinadapi Sunichena Turor Iva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtanaya Sadahari. One who is humbler than a blade of grass, more forbearing than a tree, who gives honor to others without desiring honor for himself, is qualified to always chant the holy name of Krishna. Choices in life are impacted by more than what we can share here. Hesitatingly, I do share an important point. Recently, after almost 50 years, I was told that Vishal Prabhu had been victimized in some dreadful experiences in earlier years. If that is true, it might give context to the unspoken of what we saw but did not understand about him, something not known before. If this is so, how important it is as a leading society to address and support devotees to acknowledge and negotiate that kind of internal struggle and settle that business. Some can do this, others may internally suffer, distracting them from the real business of self-realization and following Srila Prabhupada's process. We are personalists. May we learn from Vishal Prabhu's journey the importance of the 26 qualities of a devotee. Each devotee on this planet is precious, precious. Sometimes we are not present to just how precious. Sometimes we are not present to just how precious. In Vishal's case, he has taught us that even if others may not be able to see the prioritized intent of a devotee, the divine nature of God and Guru do. They see. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:9-23 from the purport. Devotional service of the Lord does not kill the natural desires of the living being, but they are applied in the right cause of devotional service. This qualifies the desire to be transferred in the spiritual sky. Transcendental potency of God and Guru. Anyone who knew Vishal Prabhu knew how deeply love was important to him. The one place he felt unreserved love was at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. Internal turmoil was there, no doubt, as in most of us. But his investment in the potency of the Krishna consciousness process and endeavoring to please Srila Prabhupada blessed him with the mercy of leaving his body in the most holiest of places, Sri Vrindavan Dham, that he loves so much. Jai Vishal Prabhu, Hari Bol. This is an offering from Vishal Prabhu's youngest daughter, Krishna Mai. My Pita, father, told me that his favorite song was All You Need Is Love by the Beatles. He would finish each phone call I had with him by saying, love, love, love. It was a very famous Beatles song in America. There's nothing you can do that can't be done. Nothing you can sing that can't be sung. Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy. All you need is love, or Krishna. Nothing you can make that can't be said. No one you can save that can't be saved. Nothing you can do, but you can learn how to be you in time. It's easy. All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love, love, love. Nothing you can know that isn't known. Nothing you can see that isn't shown. Nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be. It's easy. All you need is love. Love is all you need. Or Krishna. In the Krishna book that we used to distribute, George Harrison actually wrote, all you need is love, and then he put in parentheses, Krishna. To love Krishna is all you need. Offered by Her Grace Vishalini Prabhu. Hari Bol. Jai Vishal Prabhu ki jai.
So we thank Vishalini Prabhu for her incredible memories of Vishal. Now we'd like to invite Smahari.
Prized possession of his life. This is Srila Prabhupada's watch that was given to Vishal that he carried with him everywhere. In those 2 bags we always saw Vishal carrying, he kept all of his valuables. He kept all of his money, he kept Prabhupada's watch, everything that was of any value to him. That's why he was always carrying those 2 bags, and he had all Prabhupada's books in there as well. So when Srinivas Prabhu went through the bags, he found Srila Prabhupada's watch, and this will now be on display in Prabhupada's house. There are many other speakers. I'll just take a few moments. Vishal, here where we have the Mahaprasadam stand, that's where our original book table used to be. And we had one book distributor in the whole temple, and that was Vishal. And he would be there from morning till night, distributing books here at the temple. This is 75, 76. He would only take breaks to run out to Bihari Laos to get nimbu panis and lassis.
So
That's all.
in 1977, when Prabhupada couldn't
So
go around
in
and see
1977,
what was going on
when
around the
Prabhupada
temple,
couldn't walk around anymore to see what was going on around the temple, he would send Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
and he said,
And one day Tamal Krishna Maharaj came back
so far as I can
and he
see,
said,
the best devotee in
Prabhupada,
the whole temple is
so far as I can see, the best devotee in the whole temple is Vishal,
So he
because
had
he's always
very
distributing
special
your
place
books.
here in the hearts of all the
So he
devotees.
had very special place here in the hearts of all the devotees. He was our number one preacher, our number one book distributor, our number one collector. And of course we heard from Vishalini about the sadness of his former life as a child, losing his mother at age 6. He and his sister, they both became devotees. His sister's name is Sarvani Devi Dasi. And
Before he became a devotee, he joined the Marines.
before he became a devotee, he joined the Marines.
Military in
And the Marines are the topmost of the military in America. The strongest, the best, they joined the Marines. But in the Marines, he injured his back by Krishna's arrangement. So they had to give him a discharge, and they also gave him a pension. So unlike all the other devotees in Vrindavan, he had this huge $400 a month in the 70s, which is compared to like
50,000 rupees a month he had.
you know, 50,000 rupees a month he had. So he would use that not only for the personal needs, but he would use that for book distribution. He would always give donations to the poor people. He was actually a very gracious person. If you ever walked behind him on the road, there wasn't a single person who put their hand out that he wouldn't give something to. I would marvel at it. You know, he would just have things ready to give. Whereas I would never give anything to such people, but he was giving, they would wait in line for him to walk to the Prasadam hall. So he was a great Prasadam lover. His name, Vishal, means great. And aside from that, Vishal in the spiritual world, the name Vishal, that's of one of Krishna's sakhas, who used to always serve Krishna by massaging his feet, by fanning him, by picking flowers for him, by making garlands for him, by attending to him whenever he was tired. So Vishal in both ways, he was a great lover of Srila Prabhupada, a great devotee of Sri Krishna, and great in every respect. So we remember him with much love. My last encounter with him was, he was just thinking how to please the devotees. And we have one Sikh devotee here, Yashoda Mataji. And she had one request. She wanted a bead bag with Radha, Krishna, and a cow. So every day he would come and ask me,
did we get his bead bag yet for her?
Did we get his bead bag yet for her? Finally, we got a whole package of them. And there were 10 of them, 10 different colors. So he's trying to figure out which color Yashoda Mai might like. And he resorted to his native tongue, which was Yiddish. And because we both knew Yiddish, he said, Oy vey. So, oy vey means you just don't know how to make up your mind. You know, such a big decision. He couldn't decide which color bead bag to give to Mother Yashoda. So these are the big problems that we have in our Krishna consciousness. Which feedback color to have. So at the very end, Vishal's life was perfect. It was mentioned that he couldn't come in the country for some years. So I'll just tell you a little bit what not to do, why that happened. There was a fight within the temple that year, it was 1987. And all the foreigners, most of the foreigners who were here, they called us into the guest house lobby. And they gave us letters, and when we opened them up, it said, you must leave the country immediately and never come back. This was all arranged by the people who wanted to take over the temple. It was a big conspiracy. So each one of us did something different. So what Vishal did was, they gave us 2 hours to leave the country. So what Vishal did was, he jumped on a rickshaw, and he went to Delhi, and he went to a Supreme Court advocate, and he got the Supreme Court to cancel his blacklisting. And he brought that back to the FRO, and they were forced to keep him here for another year. But they were so angry at him because they lost the battle that after that 1 year when he went out, they wouldn't let him back again for 14 years. Yeah, so this was a lesson that we should all learn. We should be very cooperative with the government officials so that we don't anger them, because the rest of us, we were, we just did what they said and we were able to come back, but Vishal fought with them properly by going to the Supreme Court, but it cost him 14 years of his life. So we should always cooperate with our government officers, and that way we can remain here in Vrindavan and serve Krishna Balaram without any hindrance. So finally Vishal was allowed back after 14 years, and every moment that he could stay here in Vrindavan, he never went traveling anywhere. He just did what he always did. He distributed his books. Though we have other people at the bookstall, he was our original book distributor. Vishal Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna. Jai.
So we thank you.
And now we ask Mahari to please come and share his memory. Srutakirti, we'll request him to make his offering of memories of Vishal Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Most of all the stories about Srila Prabhupada have been said, I think, so I'll speak over the last few years that I've been here, my in exchanges with Vishal Prabhu. As they said, a lot of this has been described about him. And him and I, we had an interesting relationship. I knew him, of course, in the 70s when I was with Srila Prabhupada. And I remember meeting him. You would always meet him coming and going. As it said, he probably distributed Srila Prabhupada's books on more days than anyone else, any other devotee in the world, since he started way back in 1968, 1969. So maybe not the most books, but certainly the most days he was distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. And as Gunarnava said, it was the one thing I thought as well. We grew up in America watching Westerns, and that's what they would have the cowboys and the Mexicans, they would have the two things, straps going across with bullets all in them. So Vishal looked like that because he always had those two bags, one crisscrossing across his shoulders. Prajumna was another one that had two bags. His was filled with Sanskrit books, but Vishal's was filled with Srila Prabhupada's books. I remember a year or so ago walking by Tulsi Devi out there, and Vishal, as I said, he didn't often talk to me at times. He responded very much to how you dealt with him, Vishal. And me, I was always a little bit afraid of Vishal. and because of that, he responded in that way. So finally one day he said to me, and he was a little sarcastically, Srutakirti Prabhu. He'd say, what does your name mean? And I told him, well, Prabhupada said, Srutakirti is the name of Krishna, and it means one whose activities are world famous. So then he went, oh, he said. And that also, he said a little sarcastically to me. And I realized I really needed to work on my relationship with Vishal. And it was the same thing because he detected pride. That's what he saw in me. He saw that there was pride there. That's what he would say whenever he saw Shrutakirti. He would say,
And I knew he was beating me over the head every time he said it. It wasn't like it was this Shruti, like your Shruti Kirti, you know. So finally I just worked on it. I worked on trying to be pleasant somehow or other, trying to take that information and do something with it. And I got to the point with just a week or so before he left, he came up to me and he gave me a hug. You hear how he was very, being able to get close to him was difficult. And I've heard stories about people that touched him, his responses to that, which wasn't very good. But we developed a nice relationship, and me getting involved, trying to help out with Vaishnava care recently and all, I asked him if there was anything I could do for him. And everything changed from that moment. Everything changed to the point where he hugged me. He was so happy. So there's so many speakers. I just wanted to say that I'm very happy that with this particular devotee, because it's important for us as we see our God brothers, our God sisters leaving, that we develop a nice relation. We have nice relationships with these people. They're all very special. Prabhupada's disciples, like many of Prabhupada's disciples, we say he was one of a kind. You know, Vishal was one of a kind. He was a unique individual, and he was completely sold out to Srila Prabhupada. And ultimately, that's all that matters, is that service to Srila Prabhupada. All these other things, I don't even think about, because I understand myself as well. We just have to try to do some service for Prabhupada. So he took that to heart in every way, book distribution and the taking of prasadam, which was also Prabhupada's orders. He took that very nicely. So I'm very happy that our relationship evolved to the point that he was happy to see me. You know, Vishal Prabhu ki jai.
So we'd like to thank Sruti Kirti.
Proving his relationship with Vishal. So now we'd like to ask, No, let's have a go. You go. Mahadevi Mataji, offer her memories of Vishal Prabhu.
There were several devotees who sent me some memories of Vishal Prabhu on Facebook. One was from our dear godbrother Dharma Das. Vishal Prabhu was one of the early disciples of Srila Prabhupada. He joined around 1967. He particularly liked living in Vrindavan. He had lived there for almost 12 years or more, and only left temporarily to renew his Indian visa. His idea was to spend the rest of his life there, which he said that Srila Prabhupada had told him to do. Once he overstayed in India and was banned by the Indian government from returning for several years. He lived in the Iskcon Miami temple during much of that time. Vishal Prabhu was particularly attached to selling Srila Prabhupada's books. He liked to sell small books, and he was daily buying books from our Miami temple that he would go out and sell. Both at the temple and outside, he was not shy about trying to convince anyone to buy some of Srila Prabhupada's books. Although he did not sell huge numbers of books daily, he never missed a day to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. And in 1997, he was given a framed picture of Srila Prabhupada in recognition for being the top book distributor at the Iskcon Miami temple that year. Vishal Prabhu did not like being tied down to a strict schedule. Perhaps that is why he did not like doing regular deity worship. However, once while I was the Iskcon Miami Temple president, that's our Dharma Das Prabhu, and the head Pujari, I really needed some steady help. Reluctantly, Vishal Prabhu agreed to wake up the deities and to do Mangalarti every day. He continued that service for several months, which was a great help to me. Vishal Prabhu, like many devotees, liked to celebrate his birthday each year by distributing lots of prasadam to all the devotees. He would always come to my wife and I to arrange prasadam. He would ask us specifically to make gulab jamans, simply wonderfuls, cake, cauliflower pakoras, and homemade ice cream. He enjoyed distributing the prasadam to the devotees, and of course, he enjoyed it very much himself. While on the path of devotional service, we all suffer many difficulties due to our body, mind, senses, other people, etc. However, what Lord Krishna sees is how, despite all difficulties, we remain engaged in devotional service as we continue chanting Hare Krishna and glorifying Lord Krishna. The main thing is not to give up the chanting of our rounds and the path of devotional service. Vishal Prabhu, like the rest of us, had his own struggles, but he remained engaged in devotional service in a favorable way, continuously selling Srila Prabhupada's books until his last days. This attitude and the result are described in the following verse spoken by Lord Brahma in his prayers to Lord Krishna. My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds, and still offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. From the Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14. A sincere devotee earnestly tries to go back to the Lord's abode. Therefore, he willingly accepts the Lord's merciful punishment and continues offering respects and obeisances to the Lord with his heart, words, and body. Such a bona fide servant of the Lord, considering all hardship a small price to pay for gaining the personal association of the Lord, certainly becomes a legitimate son of God, as indicated here by the words Daya Bhak, quoted from the purport of the Bhagavatam 10:14. There was one submitted by Vrindavan, Vrindavan Leela, quite funny. His Grace Vishal Prabhu really likes spaghetti with tomato sauce and curd, or paneer balls. A friend of mine from New Dwarka actually cooked and shipped that dish, cooked by a devotee in LA, all the way to Miami, just for Vishal Prabhu. So I was hearing a pastime on that was being circulated on Facebook, where Prabhupada was preaching to a group of Indians here in Vrindavan. I understood it was Vrindavan, and that Vishal Prabhu and Vishalini came in through the doors with 2 big plates of Simply Wonderfuls, and Vishal Prabhu in his traditional way yelled out, "Simply Wonderfuls for a simply wonderful spiritual master." And everyone was looking at Prabhupada, big group of people, and Prabhupada had a big grin on his face. And Vishal Prabhu continued to glorify Srila Prabhupada as the perfect acharya for this age, and these books, and he held up one of Srila Prabhupada's books. These books will be the law books for the next 10,000 years. And still everyone was looking at Prabhupada and looking at Vishal, and Prabhupada just kept smiling. And then the conversation with Prabhupada and the people continued. And when Prabhupada stood up to leave, Vishal Prabhu yelled out to Prabhupada, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, I don't have 7.3 yet, Bhagavatam 7th canto. Can I borrow yours?" And Prabhupada, with a big smile, said, "Yes, take it." So obviously Srila Prabhupada and Vishal Prabhu had a very intimate and loving relationship. And I've learned also in my few exchanges with Vishal Prabhu through the years that, as B.B. Govindaswamy was saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. We don't know what devotees have experienced in this lifetime to possibly cause some trauma or possibly cause some eccentricities. But if we're engaged in devotional service and we're chanting the holy names of the Lord and we're sincerely trying to follow Srila Prabhupada's process, as we saw in Vishal Prabhu, then we can have full faith that we get the full shelter of Srila Prabhupada and our Vrindavan Lords. Just 2 days right before he left, he always sat right there every day during Raj Bhog Arti, the same spot every day. And our Nrsimha Chaitanya Prabhu had turned 73 that day. So we went over and we gave him some Mahaprasadam, 2 big pakors and sandesh, and even as we were going towards him, his eyes got really big. And when we offered it to him, his head bent down. He said, "Oh, for me?" And we said, "Yes, Nrsimha just turned 73. And he said, "Oh, I'm 83. And he said, "It is very wonderful that you can grow old here in Srila Prabhupada's temple in Vrindavan." So for those of us growing old here in Srila Prabhupada's temple in Vrindavan, we feel very fortunate. And I feel very grateful that I got to render a little service to Vishal Prabhu. And even though his personality was as we keep saying, eccentric, I'm also very eccentric, but there was something in his mood of always distributing Srila Prabhupada's books and always somehow or another wanting to give mercy. The line of beggars and unfortunate people who line up the roads, he always had 10 rupee notes, and Navadvip Prabhu from the Welcome Center told me he came regularly to take 1,000 rupees and turn them all into 10 rupee notes just for that purpose. 1,000 rupees, I don't know how often, but always giving out the mercy. So may we follow in the example of distributing mercy, seeing others always as part and parcel of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna, and feeling grateful that we get to live in the association of devotees. Hare Krishna.
Sri Vishal Prabhu ki. So we'd like to thank Mahadevi Bhatt.
I spent time with Vishal Prabhu in Miami and also a lot of time here in Vrindavan. He's definitely a special person out of the tens of millions of people in the world, great yogis who are performing great austerities to achieve perfection. And of those who think that they've come closer to God, hardly one knows the truth. And what to speak of the rare opportunity of coming in touch with a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, and to be blessed to be initiated by Srila Prabhupada and engaged in devotional service, which is also rare. So we may just speak like that, but for someone like Vishal Prabhu, to have that desire to fulfill the mission of Srila Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Just like the 6 Goswamis assisted Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so Prabhupada, especially with his early disciples, who he inspired to help plant the seeds of Krishna consciousness, this is very special and very rare. So we can fully appreciate, we heard so much pastimes of a devotee who struggled to please his spiritual master, who was blessed by Krishna and Guru to live in Vrindavan and leave in Vrindavan. So today we'll remember His Grace Vishal Prabhu and make spiritual advancement. Hare Krishna, Vishal Prabhu ki. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo. Kirtaniyas, you got 10 minutes. Hi. Wrap it up, you know.
Huh? All right, so we thank His Grace Panchagoda Prabhu for his wonderful memories of, short memories.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,